every person from movie stars to CEOs to presidents have written books on leadership. I think leadership is a very personal thing. So there are many definitions of leadership. Assume that every definition is right, because it depends on your perspective. From a personal perspective, I tell you, leaders, especially CEOs, have to get an entire organization to do things they never thought they needed to do, because you see a future before anybody else sees it. So it's almost, on paper, it's impossible to be an effective CEO, but every CEO that I talk to, so I'm not unusual in this, is always looking around the bend and seeing things that the rest of the organization has not seen. And then you have to educate the rest of the organization, and then you need to drag them to come along. And it's even worse when the company is doing well, because they'll say, if it ain't broke, why fix it? And you go, because it's going to break. How do you know? How do you know? Trust me, it's going to break. And so that's the worst message, because turning around a successful company is harder than having a burning platform. Very early in your life, invest in communication skills. How to motivate people, small groups, medium-sized groups, large groups. How do you write in a way that's pithy and to the point? Today's world of writing and texting has actually created a problem, because you think writing in 20 characters can convey what a good document can. Okay? I'm sure to you all, the same 20 characters convey the same message that, I don't know, the Gettysburg Address did, but unfortunately that's not true. You have to learn how to communicate, because when you're communicating with large groups of employees, I'm assuming that you want to move up the ladder, how you communicate and motivate them is critically important. And if you don't learn it early in life, you're never going to learn it later on in life. My husband and I married for 34 years, and we have 2 daughters. And every day you have to make a decision on whether you are going to be a wife or a mother. In fact, many times during the day, you have to make those decisions. And you have to co-opt a lot of people to help you. We co-opted our families to help us. We plan our lives meticulously so we can be decent parents. But if you ask our daughters, I'm not sure they will say that I've been a good mom. I'm not sure. And I try all kinds of coping mechanisms. I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened when my daughter went to Catholic school, Convent of Sacred Heart. And every Wednesday morning, they have class coffee with mothers. Class coffee with mothers for a working woman. How is it going to work? How am I going to take off 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings to go for a class coffee? So I miss most class coffees. My daughter would come home and she'll say, list of all the mothers that were there, and you were not their mom. First few times, I would die with guilt. But I developed coping mechanisms. I called the school and I said, give me a list of mothers who were not there. So when she came home in the evening, she'd say, you were not there, you were not there. I said, Mrs. Rag wasn't there, Mrs. So-and-so wasn't there. So I'm not the only bad mother. You have to cope, because you die with guilt. You just die with guilt. My observation, David, is that the biological clock and the career clock are in total conflict with each other. Performance with purpose is how we run the company. And to really understand the genesis of performance with purpose and what it's done for the company, I should go back a bit. I became CEO in October of 2006. And I strongly believed then, as I do now, that all corporations operate from a license, with a license from society. We're all limited liability companies, and the reason we have limited liability is because society gives us a license to operate. And because we have the license to operate, we owe society a duty of care, which means that if you operate in a society, you have to worry about the costs that you as a company are imposing on society. And it is not right to think of your P&L as revenues less your own costs, and that's your profit. It's really revenues less cost to society. That's the real profit, because you can't toss costs onto taxpayers. So if you start with that as a notion of the enterprise, you have to start thinking about what can you do to reduce those costs that you pass on to society. Okay? And nobody's going to calculate that for you and tell it to you exactly what it is. It's what you feel. And the reason it's important to think that way is because all employees in PepsiCo are first mothers, fathers, children, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, before they are employees of PepsiCo. And the only way that we thought we'd get the best and brightest to come and work at PepsiCo is if we allowed themselves to bring their whole selves to work, not park themselves at the door and walk in and be somebody else. So we had to think about how we articulate the direction of the company in a way that makes everybody feel very good about the company, not because of our financial performance alone, although that's necessary, but in terms of the holistic impact we have on society. You developed a global perspective. You devoured the news. I used to go to the US Embassy Library, the British Council, the Alliance Française, the Max Muller-Bavin. You just studied languages. You devoured everything because you were in a country which was not powerful, and therefore you wanted to learn the world. I come here and I say one of the big issues we have is we are in a country that's so powerful, that's so big, you don't need to know the rest of the world, or you didn't need to know the rest of the world. Now we have to. We didn't need to know the rest of the world, so perhaps we grew up a little bit more insular. And so many of the leaders we developed for CEO positions, if you only grew up in the US, you have less of a global perspective than if you grew up in Asia or a smaller country. And so what we're having to do now is develop people for this global perspective. So in a way, I'd say, even though I came with the disadvantage of not having grown up in the system, I came with the global perspective. I came with an emerging markets perspective. I came in here saying, hey, business has to and can be done in different ways. And it was easier for me to assimilate this model and bring the two together. This was about 14 years ago, and I was working in the office. I worked very late, and we were in the middle of the Quaker Oats integration, or the acquisition. And I got a call at about 9:30 in the night from the existing chairman and CEO at that time, and said to me that, Indra, we're going to announce you as president and put you on the board of directors of PepsiCo. I mean, I was overwhelmed because, look at my background, where I came from. To be president of an iconic American company and to be on the board of directors, I mean, I thought it was just something special had happened to me. So rather than stay and work till midnight, which I really would have done because I had so much work to do, I decided to go home and share the good news with my family. So I got home at about 10, parked the car, got into the garage, and my mother was waiting at the top of the stairs. And I said to her, Mom, I got great news for you. And she said, well, then let the news wait. Can you go out and get some milk? I said to Mom, look, I looked in the garage. Looks like my husband is home. What time did he get home? She said, 8 o'clock. I said, why didn't you ask him to buy the milk? Because he's tired. Okay, he's tired. He's tired. We have a couple of help at home. Why didn't you ask them to get the milk? She said, because I forgot. I said, okay, fine. She said, just go get the milk. We need it for the morning. So I, like a dutiful daughter, I went out and got the milk and came back. I sort of banged it on the counter and I said, I had great news for you. I've just been told that I'm going to be president on the board of directors, and all that you want me to do is to go out and get the milk. What kind of a mom are you? And she said to me, let me explain something to you. You might be president of PepsiCo, you might be on the board of directors, but when you enter this house, you're the wife, you're the daughter, you're the daughter-in-law, you're the mother, you're all of that. Nobody else can take that place. So leave that damn crown in the garage and don't bring it into the house. I'll give you one particular story, and this is one I'd like you guys to take away as you go to work. About 2 years ago, I started to write to parents of my direct reports. Okay? And it happened because, I am Indian origin and I was in India, and my father passed away many, many years ago. My mom lives in India. And I went home to spend time with her, and every 2 minutes some stranger would show up home, and my mom would say, this is the neighbor's fourth cousin, come and say hello. And I say, Mom, I'm here on vacation, I want to rest. And she'd say, you may come here for 4 days and leave, but I have to live with these people, so you better show up and be on display. So I was dressed, like I was going to a party morning to evening just to say hello to people. But the irony of it was they would come in, they'd say, oh, so this is the daughter. And then they'd blow past me in 30 seconds and go to my mom and say, you are so wonderful, you gave birth to this child, it's you, that's great. So my mom would just sit there taking all these compliments. At that point, and she's a very humble woman, but she loved this. So at that time, it occurred to me that every person is either a product or a victim of their upbringing. So I came back and I said, look, I have, at that time, between my direct reports and one more level, I had 27 of them. I said, all of these people who run PepsiCo are in fact the products of their upbringing. So I owe their parents a thank you. So I wrote to every one of the parents a standard paragraph explaining why I was writing to them. And then I wrote very tailored 2 or 3 paragraphs about their son or daughter, thanking them for the gift of their child to PepsiCo. The emotion that is evoked has been unbelievable. And I write to them now once a year since then. But the emotion that's evoked is unbelievable. They'll write me notes. Dear Indra, I just went to the store, I saw this. Maybe you should talk to my son to fix this. It is this private dialogue I have with the parents. They write to me about everything. I saw you on Squawk Box. I loved what you said. Bless you. I went to church and said a prayer for you. You know what? It's a private dialogue I have with parents, and I think it increases the commitment of the executives to PepsiCo because it's brought the whole family in. We always wrote to spouses, that's a PepsiCo tradition, but now we brought the parents in. And I say this to you because, remember I talked to you about ruling the company with heart, head, and hands? This is the heart part. And it takes more time. I also made a commitment, which I think may have been a mistake, but I committed that I would visit every one of those parents. So out of my 16 direct reports, I've done 10. I still have 6 to go. But they're not in the most readily accessible places. But I'll get it done. It was worth it.